and welcome back to the Final Scoop Roundtable discussion with Roger and Crystal.
Hello again.
As we have discussed in our last case, Rachel has taken a little step back as she's preparing to welcome her little baby boy into the world. So for now, Roger and I will just have to do. The photo recovered on these Golyar's memory card of the specific body parts consists of a foot and a thigh, which was later revealed in court to be decomposing. Thankfully, Cari's tattoo were clearly visible, and that's how they were able to confirm that it was her. But this little bit of information reveals another sadistic part to this crime. I don't know that the apartment where Cari was taken to and eventually murdered was the same one that Liz shared with her kids. I hope not. It makes me sick to my stomach to know that Liz murdered Cari in this apartment, held on to her body because by the time the photo was taken, her body was already decomposing. I can't give you for sure a timeline of how long it took because, of course, I can't tell what the weather conditions were. I can't tell you for sure that. But she must have still held on to the body, if it's not for hours, for a couple of days. And if it's in the same apartment that she shared with her kids, it makes it even sicker, even more sadistic. What motivates these stalkers? We've already shown how dangerous stalking can be, although we have covered a few cases where men were stalked. It's important to note that the majority of stalkers are men. Some psychiatrists have further narrowed the list of stalker profile down to 5. Let's take a quick look at who these 5 are. The rejected stalker. This person was rejected in a relationship and they perceive it as an insult. They feel wounded and they are seeking vindication. The resentful stalker. These are the self-righteous, self-pitying people who may threaten, but they are somehow the least likely to act on it. As we've seen at the start of our season, with the case of Dr. Jan Falkowski, his stalker, Maria Marquez, absolute description for the next type of stalker, which is the intimacy-seeking stalker. They believe they are loved or will be loved eventually by the victim. Often they focus on someone of higher social status. This person is mentally ill and delusional. The next one on this list is the incompetent. This person is socially awkward. They don't really mean any harm or intend to harm anyone, but they also don't understand the social etiquettes involved in dating and romance. So they tend to do things a bit awkwardly or say the wrong things, sometimes inappropriate things, as many of us have encountered before. So the predator is the last on our list. He is purely about sexual gratification, control, and violence. This type of stalker doesn't necessarily know their victim, and the victim may not even know they are being stalked, whilst the predator is planning their attack, rehearsing it, and building up their sexual fantasy about it, and seeing the assault as the ultimate point. And generally speaking, the ones who are most likely going to commit an assault or commit murder on their victims are the rejected and the predatory stalkers. A few of the intimacy stalkers also resulted in crimes against their victims, but more often than not, it is the rejected and the predatory stalkers. In the cases we've reviewed so far, we've encountered mostly the rejected stalker, for the exception of our first case with Dr. Jan Falkowski, as I mentioned before, whose stalker was actually an intimacy seeker stalker. But let's focus on the rejected stalker as we have portrayed in our last few cases. Victims of this type of stalker never even imagine the relationship they entered into with that person would result in a stalking behavior. Throughout the time they're dating the person, the stalker wears a mask of charm. They're even kind to people and behave like they're the nicest person initially, says John Moore, a licensed professional counselor and author of Confusing Love with Obsession. He goes on to say, "You are oblivious to their true nature until clues start to appear, but often you'd even dismiss these clues if they are just subtle. For example, when your email provider suddenly locks you out because you've logged your password incorrectly too many times, but you feel weird about it because you don't recall getting it wrong that many times. And it's just a small event that you just push to the side. In many of the scenarios, the stalking goes full throttle as the relationship ends, either by a divorce or a breakup. The stalker is still convinced that you are their ideal partner and that you belong with them. And they also believe that you are still in love with them, that they just need to make you realize that. Most of them also have somewhat of a narcissistic personality disorder, where they feel that they're the most important person in the world, in your world. They will write countless letters, texts, or emails to their victims, begging for attention. They make repeated phone calls, send gifts, flowers, candies, cards. They secretly follow their victim, both in person and digitally. When should you be concerned? When you notice the following red flags. You immediately start getting several phone calls and emails right after meeting this person. So you're not even in a relationship just yet. You've just met, and they start bombarding you already. The person becomes clingy, controlling, or upset if you want to spend time with your friends and family. John Moore says when you notice these particular red flags, don't make any sudden moves. Don't say, "I don't want anything to do with you," in a harsh tone. Such a sudden move will be perceived as a threat. Instead, take action. Tell everyone you know that this is going on. Your friends, your family, your employer if needs be. Gently but firmly tell the person you've decided to move on. Make a clean break. Don't get drawn into discussions of why. Just say this situation isn't right for me, or I'm not ready yet. Whatever you need to say, just remember to say it gently. If you feel it is still not working, file a report with the police. Get a no-contact order, then proceed to change your passwords. Never underestimate a threat. Don't take it lightly, even if it's just a text or an email. Save it, keep records, and take it to the authorities. Ignoring a threat will only get worse, and maybe at your own peril. Be aware of the obsessive love wheel, which decrypts the various stages of a relationship obsession. The first phase being the attraction, and then slowly it slides into the anxious phase, when the controlling behaviors start showing themselves. After that follows the obsessive phase. Even as you're in a relationship, sometimes you could still be stalked. And if the relationship breaks down, it moves on to the next phase, which is the destructive phase. We all want to think that we could spot a stalker from a mile away. And as comforting as it may be to hide behind the stereotypical type we imagine a stalker to be, it is critical to know that people who engage in stalking don't have to check any of the stalker's box we expect them to. According to a research published in 2012, a stalker's motivation ranges from a desire to reclaim a prior relationship all the way to a psychotic identification to their victim. There are three main motivations for stalkers who go on to stalk an ex. First one being controlling tendencies. Stalkers are often controlling in multiple areas of their life, including their romantic relationships. The next one is feeling of entitlement. Stalkers often feel that their former partners belong to them. The last one is rejection. Stalkers see themselves as the victims, the one being led on or left behind. They are often jealous, obsessive, compulsive and controlling, manipulative, unwilling to take responsibility for their actions, unable to take no for an answer, and prone to mood changes. Protect yourself. Destroy discarded mail before throwing them out. Shred important documents. If you think you are being followed, make 4 consecutive left or right turns. If you notice the vehicle still following you, drive straight to the nearest police station. Do not drive home or to a friend's or to family's. Do not stop or get out of your car. Always keep your phone handy and charged. Trust yourself and your instinct. If a situation feels wrong, it probably is. Tell the stalker no once and only once, and then do not give him or her the satisfaction of a reaction again. The more you respond and the more upset or emotional you seem, the more you will teach them that their actions do elicit a response which is what they are looking for, and further reinforces that what they are doing is right in their warped mind. Don't be embarrassed and think you brought this on yourself. Stalkers need no further encouragement. Your shame is your stalker's best weapon, as they are sure it will isolate you or make you feel so ashamed of sharing your situation with your surrounding, which gives them the best opportunity, the best conditions to stalk you more and maybe cause you harm. Be proactive. Have faith in your network of people to rally around you. Tell your family, your neighbors, co-workers, friends, flatmates. Ask them to not give any information about you, your schedule, or your life to anyone. If you can, get a new unlisted phone number and be cautious about who you give it out to. Don't accept random friends' requests from people you don't know on your social media, female or male, as they could be made-up profiles or real people whom your stalker have reeled in to assist them to gain access to you. Document everything: timelines, dates, keep voice messages, even if the calls are silent. Keep a log of drive-bys or suspicious events, such as the person constantly showing up in places you frequent, in the same places on the same day, and they let you know that they are there. So, Roger, what did you think of this case?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to come at this. There's like how you look at it from the logical perspective, which we'll come to, and then there's like the emotional context of it. Like, what's the most shocking part? And for me, the bits that really kind of stuck into me was the lengths that they would go to and the duration of time for which they did it. So in the case of the woman that was terrorizing the ex-boyfriend, it's the books that she had and the details and the planning and the execution, because it's one thing after another, after another, after another. And then with the woman who was pretending to be the girlfriend that had left, again, it's the lengths she went for and the duration that she kept the charade up for. It's just like an emotion level. It's just staggering even that you can even imagine somebody doing that.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you on the first case. I'm a planner, right? And you know that I like to keep lists of a lot of things. It was especially shocking to me. It also terrified me as someone who tends to keep lists and have organized way of dealing with things. The extent that somebody would go to, and 7 ring binders full of it's like a shopping list of crimes that she's going to commit against this guy. That was terrifying to me. And the second case, there is, on the emotional standpoint, what sickened me is the thought of, okay, she kept the charade for long. That's nuts in itself. you have to be an excellent liar to be able to keep that up. You know, I mean, there are some people who are cheating on their spouse who can't keep up with one lie. Now, imagine someone who's lying about being stalked and being harassed by a person, and also stalking and harassing the boyfriend, pretending that it's the ex-girlfriend. There's too many storylines here to keep to keep track of. But what was quite sickening to me is the thought of when the photos were recovered from her memory card, and they found the picture of two specific body parts, which is the foot and the thigh. It was later revealed in court that these body parts had already started decomposing. The terrifying thought that crossed my mind, and I don't know that for sure because I am only speculating here. I don't have that kind of information. I don't know if she actually murdered her into her own apartment where she lived with her kids, or if it was a different apartment, because that's where the body laid.
Yeah, where was it stored in this time period?
Exactly. What sickens me is if it was the same apartment that she shared with her kids. Again, I'm going by pure logic here because I'm no expert in this particular field. However, I think we can all go as per logic to understand that a body, it just doesn't decompose within an hour.
No, and there's going to be smells. So if it's in your own home or around anywhere where people can smell it, you would imagine if it's there for any duration of time, that's what you always hear on crime shows, that a neighbour smelt something or...
Well, we also need to note, again, I'm no medical expert, but the things that help something decompose, it would be also temperature conditions that it is being kept at. So I cannot claim to know what temperature it was and all of that. So I'll just go by pure logic that she held on to that body for some time. It could be hours, it could be a couple of days, I don't know. But the fact that it was there, that's very sickening, because she didn't take that photo straight after murdering her. She took the photo when the body was already decomposing. I'm not really sure what the purpose of it was. It was to admire her handiwork. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to what was she planning to do with the body? Did she have a fully formed plan or just part of a plan? I mean, one of the things that kind of also sticks out with her is the amount of lies. For a lot of people, lying is quite stressful. Plus, it's very hard to keep a lie straight because if it's challenged, they tend to have to make up another lie to cover it up. And it starts to become apparent to the person. So in this case, the person she's actually stalking, you would think that maybe they would see telltale signs where part of a lie is fraying at the edges, or she's showing some stress for having to lie for such an extended period. But then when we got into the psychology of what some of these people are like, that was one of the things they noticed with sociopaths and psychopaths and people with those kind of disorders, is that they don't fear consequences as much. Plus, they don't tend to show the same response to stress. If that is the emotional side of things, like our reaction to what we've seen, if we then move across to the logical side of things, and we go back to what are the lessons that we can learn potentially from looking at these specific cases, because we try to pick a specific case that somehow challenges our pre-existing assumptions about stalking. Then in the first case, or what they both have in common is, instead of ending in murder, but they could have ended in murder, they've gone in a different route. So in the first instance, it ended with one of the best examples that we've seen of like just a malicious vengeance. The research, the planning, and just the effort in execution of a whole sequence of completely different ways to terrorize the victim. That's what stands out about the first one. What stands out about the second one is actually what an example it is of the lengths that a stalker could go to manipulate their victim into staying with them. And then what they both share in common is their lack of any sense of consequence or care about harming innocent people. And it also comes out in the way that they're acting out. So the woman who's terrorizing her ex-partner, how she terrorizes, say, the landlord of the potential new girlfriend, whilst in the case of the woman who's manipulating her ex-partner into staying with her, how she murders this new potential girlfriend at what would be a very early stage of their potential relationship.
And yes, and I agree with you. I mean, you brought up just an interesting point here where you said it's at an early stage of a relationship. So for all she knew, it might not have worked. So somebody who would take such an extreme and drastic step to end somebody's life
at such an early stage.
Yeah.
I mean, it says something about their mental condition that just someone essentially dating somebody is enough for them to think, well, it's okay to murder that person.
And don't forget that she literally never met and spoken to that person before. She only passed her for a couple of seconds in the hallway.
Yeah. So again, when we go back in one of the earlier episodes, we were talking about how it's almost a hallmark of some stalkers is the lack of regard for not just consequences, but when it comes to harming other people, whether it's terrorizing them, like with the potential girlfriend's landlord, whether it's murdering somebody who's just dating the boyfriend. And there should be these signs of like a callousness that you can spot when it comes to other people.
Yeah, and for all you know as well, I mean, for all she knew, it could have been that it's not a girlfriend, that it's just a friend who came to visit him.
It could have very easily been just a platonic two people who share like an interest in something, who are around there having a drink, talking about it. She sees them, assumes something else, and ends up killing her. So you said it could have very easily, for all she knows, have been not even a romantic relationship.
Could have been somebody who was in that person's life who she'd never met before, and she just automatically assumed that this person is a romantic partner. Which leads me to, earlier I was talking about the psychiatrists who've developed several stalker profile. And we've seen that obviously the ones that we have covered the most so far is the rejected stalker, which would fit into these two women who have committed such acts of crimes against their ex-partner or potential love interest of their ex-partner. So the rejected stalker is a person who feels rejected in a relationship, and who sees that person, the ex-person, as, somebody who's done them wrong, but they still want them to be with them. And they feel wounded, and they feel that this act of stalking is vindication for the pain that was caused to them.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And the one thing that you just literally brought on, which fits quite interestingly into the 3 tiers of motivation that those stalkers have for stalking their ex. And because you just said, to what end did she do that, right?
Yeah.
And one of the first thing was controlling tendencies. So these people already in their daily lives, in other parts of their lives, not just romantic, they are controlling by nature. There's a lot of people who are controlling. I can be controlling at times. I don't want to control my partner, but I want to be in control of the situation, for example, that I'm dealing with. Like, for example, if it's in my workplace, I want to be in control of the task at hand, right? There are people, though, who take this to the extreme, almost in an obsessive, compulsive way. And I think that would fit into that category. Feelings of entitlement. Now, this is very fitting to what you just said, Roger, because the stalkers often feel that the former partner somehow belonged to them and still belong to them. It's almost as if they have this attitude, if I can't have you, no one can.
Yeah, it's like in the previous episode when we talked about the study of stalking victims, and they identified there's 6 to 8 stages, and one of the key stages was that in the mind of the stalker there is an event very early on that implies something to them, like, okay, now you're essentially mine. You have committed to me through whatever action is they see as being the commitment.
Yeah. And the final motivation factor for a stalker is rejection, as we have discussed further. But what's interesting here, when you break it down even further, is not only do the stalkers see themselves as the victims, they see themselves as the victims of this relationship that they want to work that hasn't worked, but also they feel like you've led them on. So I'm the victim because you led me on. I'm the victim because I'm the one who's left behind. You're moving on, and it's not fair because I'm still suffering and you're moving on.
Yeah.
In another sense.
It's another form of control. It's them controlling the narrative of what has happened in their mind to justify their actions. I did just want to say that the one thing that I find interesting this week in terms of the kind of the resources that we're bringing into the discussion, where we're talking about these new ways of classifying a stalker. In the previous shows, we talked about how doctors potentially, in court cases, classify someone as a psychopath, a sociopath, narcissistic personality disorder, etc., and how those are used in a courtroom, but they're supposed to be diagnosis tools, so they're built for a specific purpose that doesn't necessarily work. So the thing I like about this, bringing this in, and these categorizations and this way of looking at it, it helps us look at stalkers in different ways to try and identify them and deal with them in the correct way, because obviously a sociopath or a narcissistic personality disorder person or a rejection stalker, they may respond differently to different circumstances, so you need to know which one you're dealing with to use the right approach.
You mean like this has been specifically designed to help us identify those red flags in a way, right?
To identify the flags and to understand which type of stalker you're potentially dealing with.
Okay.
Because, as I say, the measures that you might take might be slightly different depending on which type of stalker you've got or which personality disorder you think they may have.
Yeah. Very interesting point. Fair point, Roger. I was talking earlier about protecting yourself, the things that you can do to protect yourself. And one of the tips that I found actually quite interesting, and I thought it was important for me to pass this on, is if you are, for example, driving in your car and you notice that there's a car following you, one of the best things for you to do as a tip to make sure, because, there's many of us have had times where we were paranoid. It happened to me many times where I'm driving and I see the same car going in the same direction for a long period of time, and suddenly I start thinking, is that person following me? So in case you're feeling, okay, am I being paranoid or is that car really following me? One of the tips is make 4 left turns or 4 right turns. And if the car is still there, do not drive home. Do not drive to a family member. Do not drive to a friend. Drive yourself straight to the nearest police station. Do not stop. Do not lower your window for anybody else. And keep your phone handy and fully charged at all times. But there is another point. When I was telling that to Roger, he brought it up and I thought it was quite an interesting tip as well for us to have, because sometimes we're walking, and if you find yourself in the street walking, especially at a late hour when there's not much traffic on the road, not many people walking about, and you feel like you need to be safe, this was a very interesting tip that Roger had for you.
Yeah, there's certain advice that gets handed out when it comes to personal protection, because there are some people in society who might get stalked, and they give certain advice. There's a couple of things that are like recommended. So if you're walking down a street and you think maybe you're being followed, then that is to simply cross the street, because the act of stopping to cross the street, it allows you to look out of your peripheral vision to see that person behind you. And when you cross over the street, does the same person also a little later cross the street for no apparent reason? So it's a bit of a red flag. Another one that comes up that maybe only a bit more relevant in more public areas like shopping areas is the use of reflective surfaces. So just walking down a street and glancing into a shop window, you can kind of see from the reflection what is behind you or to the side of you, or you can even sometimes just go into the shop just to see if the person goes past and then come out and go double back the way you came. Another one that came up in conversation is, in this day and age where we have mobile phones, if you think you're being followed, you can just take the phone out, and it's not uncommon for people to occasionally hold the phone quite high and just snap a picture over your shoulder.
Take a selfie.
Yeah, because the quality of cameras now, you can zoom right in. You can always put it on Facebook, and a little bit later just go on and put a comment like, oh my gosh, is that so-and-so behind me? So people indirectly know that somebody may be following you that they also know.
Interesting thing that you just said. I would also add to this, like you said, in this day and age, we all use social media, we all use WhatsApp. But if you do seriously feel like you are in such a situation, take a selfie, send it to a friend or send it to a family member and tell them where your location is. Also, there is a possibility on WhatsApp where you can actually send your GPS location. Do that so people can find you.
Yeah, so it's time and location stamped. So it also helps in terms of if you're trying to document stalking to try and get some kind of court order.
Mm-hmm.
One more point just to add, when you mentioned the protection measures for if you're driving a car, the other advice they give out is to change the route that you drive home by. Because obviously if you're driving your normal route and you see a certain make and model of car following you and you do your 3 turns, and the next day you try driving another route and there's the same car again, well, there's another red flag.
On this note, we bid you farewell for this episode. Thank you for listening. In the meantime, stay safe.